I moved into the house in early November. The weather had just turned cold, and the floor made this dry, hollow sound when I stepped on it, like someone softly inhaling behind you. I bought the place because it was cheap. The seller signed the contract with almost no hesitation. The house was in the suburbs of Minnesota, about a 15-minute drive from the nearest grocery store, and even farther from my job. But I liked the quiet. The first night, I noticed the sounds in the house. I didn't think much of it. Old houses creak. That's just how they are. But that night, just as I was about to turn off the lights, I heard footsteps downstairs. Slow, deliberate steps on the wooden floor. I froze. The room was pitch black except for the little standby light on the TV glowing faintly in the corner. I sat there gripping the blanket, waiting. Nothing happened. I figured maybe the floorboards were shifting from the heat. The next day, while I was installing shelves in the kitchen, I noticed a child's drawing taped to the wall, probably left by the previous owner. It showed a smiling kid and two adults wearing hats, standing in front of a double bed. Nothing too strange, but something about the adults felt off. They were smiling, but their eyes were just empty circles, holes. I pulled the drawing down and tossed it in the trash. But that night, when I got home, it was back on the wall. Same exact spot. I didn't touch it again, just looked at it for a second, then walked away. I wasn't scared. Not really, just unsettled. About a week later, the dreams started. In them, I was small, like a child again, crouched beside the bed, watching two figures stand in the bedroom doorway. They were backlit, faces like skulls, but their voices were soft, kind. They said, "We brought cake. Happy birthday." I'd wake up with my heart pounding, the room freezing cold. I checked the thermostat, everything was normal. The third time I dreamt of them, I woke up to find something beside my bed. A paper cupcake, with a candle stuck in it, unlit. I panicked. Tore the bedsheets off looking for something, but there was nothing. Just a few candies scattered under the bed. I went to the police station in town, filed a report. They took it down, but didn't seem too concerned. One officer said it was probably a prank. Or I misremembered. Someone broke in, but left no trace. He just shrugged. After that, I started locking the bedroom door at night. Even propped a chair against it before I went to sleep. But in the fourth dream, the skull-faced couple stepped into my room. They said, "Why did you lock the door? We're your mom and dad." I told them they weren't. They just smiled and said, "Then how do you still remember our voices?" That morning I woke up cold on the floor beside the bed, just like in the dream. I don't remember getting there. My face was pressed against the wooden boards, cold enough that I could smell the dust. When I stood up, I slammed my knee into the bed frame. It stung like hell. I decided I had to move. The house wasn't right. But when I was packing, I found a photo on the living room table. I'd never seen it before. It was a couple and a child. The kid was wearing the same pajamas I'd worn the night before. I didn't recognize the adults, but their smiles were exactly like the ones from my dreams. I ripped the photo up, burned it, dumped the ashes in the trash. I called the realtor and told him I wanted out of the deal. He said there was a process. It might take a few weeks. I said I didn't care. I was leaving. He tried to convince me to stay one more night. I hung up and booked a motel room. I woke up at 2 a.m. The motel room door was wide open. On the floor were a few candies and the cake box. I ran straight to the front desk and called the cops. They came, looked around, said everything seemed normal. I started wondering if I was losing my mind. I saw a doctor. He asked if I was under a lot of stress. I didn't know what to say. I just told him. I was too scared to sleep. One last time, I went back to the house to grab some documents. It wasn't even dark yet when I arrived. The place was quiet. I opened every window, let the sunlight in. But when I went upstairs and started looking for the folder, I heard the front door open. I thought maybe it was the realtor, so I called out. No one answered. I crept downstairs, each step muffled like I was walking on cotton. They were standing in the kitchen doorway. The skull-faced couple. They didn't move, just watched me. "You haven't had your cake," the woman said. I didn't answer. "Your birthday hasn't passed yet," the man added. I stared at them. Their shadows looked normal, human, but their faces were blank. I backed away, step by step. They followed, step by step. I turned and bolted upstairs, locked myself in the bathroom. I don't know if they stayed outside the door, but I could hear footsteps. They came up slowly, then stopped. No knocking, no voices. I stayed in the bathroom all night, until daylight. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty. I went downstairs. All the windows were shut. The door was locked. On the dining table was a cake. 3 candles on top, all of them lit. I didn't take anything. I just walked out the door and never came back. I first noticed the light in my neighbor's house turning on every night at exactly 10 p.m., then shutting off at 2 a.m. sharp. Normally, that wouldn't be strange except that house had been empty for nearly a year. It was my 2nd month living there. The house was in Michigan, where winters grew damp and oppressive. The neighborhood wasn't lively, mostly retirees, a few working professionals, and me, one of the few young single residents. I spotted the light for the first time on a Thursday night. I'd been watching the news on my couch, and when the broadcast ended, I got up to shower. Passing the front door, I happened to glance out the window at the house across the street. A light was on upstairs, warm, orange, the kind that came from old tungsten bulbs. I remembered clearly. That house had been empty long before I moved in. The realtor told me the owner lived in Florida, waiting for the market to improve before selling. The next night, the light was on again. I called the realtor. He said he'd check, then called back hours later. The house is definitely vacant. No one's renting it. I wasn't sure if he'd actually checked, but I let it go. I just wanted to confirm I wasn't imagining things. Then, a week later, I started hearing voices. I'm a light sleeper. Around 1 a.m., I usually wake up for water. That night, I went downstairs, flicked on the kitchen light, and froze. Laughter floated in from outside, faint, muffled, like a group of people talking quietly. I turned off the light and crept to the window. The sound was coming from that house, maybe squatters, a homeless family. I called 911. 2 officers showed up. No one answered the door. They checked the back locks intact, windows unbroken. After 15 minutes, they told me there's no one inside. Call again if you see anything else, one said before leaving. I didn't sleep well that night. In my dreams, a light kept shining in my face. When I woke at dawn, the house's upstairs light was still on, but I swore it had been off when I'd woken up earlier. By the 3rd week, I worked up the nerve to go over. I knocked. No answer. I slipped a note under the door. Are you living here? I'm your neighbor across the street. Let me know if you need anything. The next day, the note was still there, but the door was slightly open. I shouldn't have gone in. I knew that, but I did. The house was thick with dust. The entryway had footprints, dry but distinct. I followed them to the living room, where 3 chairs faced a blank wall. A half-finished puzzle lay scattered on the floor. Then I heard its footsteps upstairs. Slow, steady. I froze. They stopped, started again. Then, a door creaked open. I should have left. Instead, a boy came downstairs. He couldn't have been older than 10, drowning in an oversized sweater. When he reached the landing and saw me, he said, "Are you new?" I stared. "You live here?" He nodded. "My parents are sleeping upstairs." I glanced up the steps. Nothing but darkness. "I thought this house was empty," I said. "Who told you that?" He tilted his head. I took a step back. "Sorry. I should have knocked." He didn't answer. just smiled and turned back up the stairs. I left, closing the door softly behind me. My note was still wedged in the crack. That night, I kept my curtains drawn and went to bed early. But I woke up at 2 a.m. to a freezing room and laughter outside my window. I didn't look. The next day, I called the realtor again. He insisted the house was still empty. I told him about the boy. He said he'd contact the owner. Days later, he called back. Owner says, no one's renting it. No one has keys. I asked if the owner had family. Not anymore, he said. I stopped going near that house, but every night, like clockwork, the light turned on. Until one night, it didn't. And for some reason, that unsettled me more. I barely slept, convinced someone was standing outside my door. Finally, at 3 a.m., I went downstairs to check. A single puzzle piece lay on my welcome mat, damp, stuck to the floor. I picked it up. On the back, in smudged handwriting, you said to let you know if we needed anything. Our house is an old single-family home. There's a basement that used to be just storage, but after my dad retired, he converted it into my room, so I could have more space to myself. It's not a big room, just one small window near the ceiling, where you can see the back alley ground and the shadows of car wheels passing by. At first, everything felt fine. The walls were a little damp, so I got a dehumidifier and tucked it in the corner. My parents lived upstairs, and they didn't bother me at night. That first week, everything was normal. It was even quieter than my old room. Things started to change during the second week. A water stain began forming in the corner of the wall. At first, it was just a faint grey smudge, like someone had splashed water there. But it kept spreading, darkening. I figured the dehumidifier had broken, so I bought a new one. The next day, the stain was worse, like someone had pressed their wet hands against the wall. I asked my dad about it. He said basements are just like that, damp and musty. Said stuff used to get moldy down there even back when it was storage, but something felt off to me. The marks looked like someone was trying to push their way out from behind the wall. One night, just as I was about to go to sleep, I heard water. It sounded close. I walked into the bathroom, but the faucet was off, the floor was dry. Then I heard it again, this time, coming from the direction of my bed. I crouched down to check under it. Nothing but darkness. Is someone there? I actually said it out loud. The water stopped. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept feeling like something was in the room with me. In the morning, I noticed the bottom of my pajama shirt was damp. I told myself it was sweat from a nightmare, but the dampness was cold, not warm, not like sweat. After that, every morning I'd find something wet, part of a shirt, the back of my hoodie, sometimes a whole sleeve soaked through. I started thinking maybe there was a leak behind the walls, but when I asked my dad to check, he ran his hand along the wall and said there was nothing. Then he got mad, asked if I was just wearing clothes that hadn't fully dried. Then I started dreaming. In the dream, I was lying in bed, and I'd hear someone knocking from the other side of the wall. Thump, 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 like slow, deliberate taps coming through water. I couldn't move in the dream. My eyes were open. I'd see a face slowly rise up beside my bed. Wet skin, wide unblinking eyes. It never said anything, just came closer. I'd wake up with my face damp, like someone had touched it. I looked in the mirror once and saw my eye was red and puffy, like it had been rubbed hard. I didn't mention it to anyone. My family just assumed I was stressed. Told me I should sleep earlier. I couldn't take it anymore. I told my parents I wanted to move back upstairs. They said the upstairs room was full of storage, and they needed a few days to clear it out, so I had to stay a few more nights in the basement. One night, I found a note under my desk. The paper was wet. On it, in crooked handwriting like a kid's, were the words, "You can't leave." I showed it to my parents. Neither of them had seen it before. My mom's face looked strange, she said. Maybe it's one of your old notes. I thought, when would I have written something like that as a kid? The last night I stayed in the basement, I woke up feeling something heavy pressing down on me. I couldn't move, my eyes were open. I heard a dripping sound, drip, drip, drip right next to my ear. Then, footsteps, slow, coming closer. There was a wet shadow by the wall. It moved toward the bed and stopped right beside me. Then it leaned down. The pressure got worse, like it was climbing onto me. I tried to scream, to say get off me, but nothing came out. Then I gasped awake, breathing hard, my clothes were soaked with sweat. But when I looked down at the floor beside the bed, there was a wide, dark wet stain, cold, real. I ran upstairs and never went back down. Later, my parents sealed off the basement. Said it was too damp, too old, needed a full renovation. I didn't say much. I just knew, whatever was down there, it wasn't part of our family.